Chapter 7, Marcus. Saturday, October 13, 2018, a few weeks ago, Tammy initiated an activity among the youth, a fabric dyeing workshop that was an overwhelming success. Funded by the Katsuyori Foundation, the workshop taught the youth how to create tropical leaf batiks which were beautiful, colorful, and trendy, and they thought of turning it into a business, making everyone excited. And voila! An excuse to celebrate. With smiles on their faces, men, women, and children have started boarding the boat. Unlike any other pump boat on the island, this type that Amanda rented had a huge capacity and was often used for island hopping tours, deep-sea diving, snorkeling, fish feeding, etc. It had a shower, karaoke, and a small kitchen, which was well utilized. Over the past few weeks, saddened by the fate of her best friend, who lived the life of a single mother, Lorena has chosen to spoil May, buy her beautiful clothes, brand new appliances, and even secure her children's education, thinking that she had more to benefit from her company than her friend. She was like a sister to her, and she had no hesitation in sharing all her wealth with her. Reluctant to take part in the boat trip at first, it didn't take May that much effort to put a smile on Lorena's face with her funny antiques. Much like her auntie Tata, May has this obnoxious laugh that Lorena deeply adores, and whenever she's with her, there is never a dull moment. While holding each other's hands, they board the boat, reliving their past misdeeds and the good old days when they had to fight with men twice their age, without a care in the world, and they were just laughing it all out. Once considered as notorious trash of society, the two beautiful ladies had made havoc among the neighboring barangay, selling drugs, engaging in prostitution and stealing from wandering foreigners that they encounter along the way. These were the fragments of the past that they were glad to keep in the closet, like an old decaying photograph that is better forgotten. "So where exactly are we going?" Lorena asked. "I believe Tammy has requested for the sandbars of the Kwaming Island," May replied. "The Kwaming Island?" Lorena asked, bewildered. "Is there something wrong?" "Not really, with all the preparation you guys made, I thought we were headed to some expensive resort." "Well, you know your sister better than anybody, she has this thing for simple life." "That's true," Lorena replied, smiling. Engrossed with the stories they shared, Lorena had almost forgotten about her husband and went on to search for him. Turning her attention to the opposite end of the boat, behind the pile of baggage, she spots Shigeru signaling her the words, "I love you." As a response, she signals him back with a vicious flying kiss, knocking him off his seat under pretenses, making everyone laugh. Undoubtedly, Shigeru to Lorena was a little child trapped in the body of an aging assassin. "He's so adorable," May said, causing Lorena to react. "Stay away from my husband," Lorena cried half-jokingly, giving everyone a good laugh. The weather was warm and sunny, with a gust of wind blowing from the east as they headed towards the Jilitongan Marine Sanctuary, where they gathered sea urchins, enjoyed swimming, and indulged in a sumptuous seafood feast. "Onsen, come on in, the water's great," Tammy yelled as she invited her sister to come and join them in the water. With the encouragement of May, Lorena finally dives into the open water, but not before she throws the unsuspecting Shigeru. They enjoyed themselves in the crystal clear water without any worries in the world. Tammy, as always, was the star of the show. Everybody was amazed at how fearless she was in the water, and most especially for the young people, she was someone whom they all looked up to. After a few minutes of splashing in the water, the two couples were among the first to get out, while the others, under the leadership of Tammy, remained until their fingers went wrinkly. Lorena, picking up the towel, started drying her hair, and sat beside Shigeru. "You seem to be in a good mood today," Shigeru asked as he stared in amazement. Lorena responded with a smile and wrapped her arms around him. "How are you doing with your transcription?" Shigeru asked. "I'm doing pretty well. It is more tedious than I thought it would be, but I'll get it done soon enough, she answered. I thought you would have been finished by now. Don't worry about it, I have it covered, Lorena replied. After having so much fun at the Jilitongan Marine Sanctuary, they went straight to the sandbar. A few tropical birds were proudly strolling on the beach just a few meters away from where they were, giving so much excitement to Tammy, who by nature is so fond of migratory birds. Not wearing her next-generation prosthetic arms and legs, she rushed to the birds as if she was longing to fly. Amanda, hurry up. Let's get closer to the birds, Tammy exclaimed. Watching from a distance, Amanda, with some friends, was approached by a handsome Filipino-American young man, carrying a relatively small wooden surfboard with a retro design. Oh my God, Amanda thought to herself, staring at the half-naked man in admiration. Hi, how are you doing today? The young man asked. We're good, thank you for asking. That's a funky-looking surfboard, did you make that? Amanda asked. Yes, I did, from wooden scraps. That's impressive. This is Jenny and Sophia, and I'm Amanda. Hi, I'm Marcus. Looking the other direction to the location of Tammy. Who's the adorable penguin? That's my sister, her name is Tammy. Why do you ask? She's very hard to miss with all that energy. She is quite a character. Oh yeah, that's her all right. Come, I'll introduce you to her. Tammy was currently picking up seashells when they approached her. Hi there. Hello, Tammy replied. My name is Marcus. Having her attention on the surfboard. Can I borrow your surfboard? Tammy asked. Yeah, sure, said Marcus, handing the surfboard to Tammy, and with the shock of his life, she grabbed the wooden surfboard with her short arms and ran to the ocean. Utterly astonished, Marcus remained speechless as he watched Tammy defy gravity, splashing and speeding into the water as if she were a sea creature riding a surfboard. Amanda stood beside Marcus smiling and jokingly picked up a handful of sand and gave it to Marcus. What's that? That's your jaw. Ha ha ha, wow, your sister is amazing. Yes, I know. She makes me proud. Why are you so interested in my sister again? I can't think of any other pickup line. Amanda broke out with a merry laugh and answered, I admire your honesty. Well, if you're truly interested to know, I was minding my own business, thinking of a good subject for a blog when I suddenly saw an angel falling from the heavens, and that's when I decided to approach her. Suddenly blushing and a little embarrassed, Amanda looked up to her friends and grinned back at Marcus, saying, I find your beguiling aura amusing, but I must warn you. I'll cut your balls if you intend to play, she threatened, shocking Marcus and her two companions. My intentions are pure, Marcus replied stutteringly. I just wanted to know you better. Okay, don't say I didn't warn you. Sophie, wanting to change the topic, interrupted asking, Marcus, you mentioned something about creating a blog. Yes, I'm a blogger. Where are you from? My parents are both Cebuanos, but I was raised in Manila before moving to the United States, he replied. Oh, okay. So are you here for business or pleasure? Well, now that I've found Amanda, I was hoping to make my stay here more enjoyable, but she doesn't seem to trust me. I never said I didn't trust you. I was merely sending you a heads up. Having said that, how would you like to join our company? She asked. Oh, wow. I'd love to. Perhaps you might consider featuring Tammy in one of your blogs, Sophia suggested. You think she'd let me? Marcus asked, turning to Amanda. You would have to ask her yourself, but personally speaking, I don't think you'll have a hard time convincing her. She was born to be in front of the spotlight. At that moment, while staring at her sister playing with the surfboard, she felt Marcus staring at her in a very affectionate manner. Yes. Can I help you? Amanda asked without looking. Have anyone ever told you that you're so beautiful? Unable to hide her blush, she looked up to him and asked, "You find me attractive?" "Yes, I do." Intentionally coughing in the back, their two other companions, Jenny and Sophia, reminded the two lovers that they weren't alone and started to taunt both of them. Noticing that Tammy was paddling in deeper waters, Marcus interrupted. Sorry to interrupt, but your sister is getting into deep waters." Looking towards her sister's direction. "Oh, I would not worry about her. She's a mermaid," she replied jokingly, sending a bit of a smile. "Let's go and join your sister," Marcus suggested, while suddenly grabbing Amanda's wrist. Everyone stared at them like a couple, including Shigeru and Lorena. For once in her life, Lorena saw her sister enjoy herself in the company of a stranger. Marcus made her feel special, and Lorena saw it in her eyes, which made her very happy for her sister. Before nightfall, Shigeru and Marcus had already gathered the woods and built a bonfire where everyone gathered. Lorena finds Marcus a good companion for Amanda and has even gone as far as teasing the two of them. "Marcus," Lorena called. "Yes. Would you believe if I were to tell you that Amanda has never dated anyone in her whole life?" "She's just kidding, right?" Marcus asked Amanda, who was seated next to him. Blushing with embarrassment, Amanda was only able to smile at the question. "Amanda told me you're a blogger," Lorena asked. "Yes, that's true. I have a website for my blog, a Facebook account, an Instagram account, and a YouTube channel. All are called The Wandering Ruckus." "Wow, that's quite a handful. How do you manage to keep track of updates on all of these platforms?" Lorena asked. "Well, I'm not working all at the same time on my updates. The key is to find the correct balance, otherwise, you'll end up with a mediocre job." "What do you blog about?" Shigeru asked, grilling fish and steak from behind. "Food and travel." "Bloody hell, Marcus," Shigeru said, removing his apron, and everyone was laughing. "I'm sorry, but you get your ass up here. I'm getting myself a beer." Surfing on her cell phone, Lorena was intrigued by what Marcus said and started to view his YouTube channel. "You're quite an influencer, with an impressive number of followers. You've got to be doing well financially." "Just enough to make a decent living, thank you," Marcus replied. "That's good to know," she said, smiling. After having dinner, everybody took the time to socialize. With the bottles of liquor out of its boxes, the men started drinking. Shigeru asks Lorena, "Where is Marcus?" "Hopefully getting my sister pregnant," Lorena said jokingly. "They will be back soon. They just walked to the top of the sandbar. Don't even think about getting that young man drunk, okay? I've got my eyes on you." Laughing at his wife's reaction, he gives her a sweet kiss before going back to the men. Meanwhile, embracing each other at the tip of the sandbar, Marcus and Amanda were both enjoying each other's company. "Don't you think we're a little getting ahead of ourselves?" Amanda asked. "What do you mean?" "I mean this." Pretending to be a little bit confused. "Oh, you mean this. The weather is a little bit cold. We're just keeping ourselves warm." With a flirtatious smile, she replied. "Good job, I like your style," before reaching out and kissing him again. "Okay, you have my permission, but don't you get any other ideas? This is as far as it goes." "Yes, ma'am," he replied. 3 days before the excursion to the island, Shigeru had already discovered Lorena's transcription notes and was giving her some time to think and compose herself, hoping that she would open up to him willingly. Lorena was scavenging for leftover food when Shigeru approached her. "Are you still hungry?" Displaying a funny face, Lorena picks up a roasted chicken leg on a stick and takes a big bite. "Yum yum." Munching on the meat like a tramp who hasn't eaten in days. "You want some?" Lorena asked, as she peeled a piece of chicken and handed it directly to his mouth. "That's a tasty chicken." "This is mine," she exclaimed, taking the chicken away from Shigeru jokingly. Shigeru smiled, and he sat down beside her on the sand and stared at her face. "What?" Lorena asked. "Nothing." "Why do you stare? Do I have chicken on my face?" Shigeru, giggling slightly at the funny faces she had been making. After a few minutes of chewing on the chicken, she turned her attention to him and said, "You know, there is something I need to tell you." "What is it?" "It's about the journal. I've finished decoding it, and I've come across some surprising information." "Well, let's hear it." "There is indeed a possibility that Samuel might still be alive," she said. "How did you come to that conclusion?" Shigeru had sensed her uncertainty when pausing to think things over, and he understood why. "I also have a confession," he said, feeling compelled to tell the truth. "What's that?" "I knew you were done with your transcription, and I read your notes." "Oh, that's fine. What I'm interested to know is how you concluded that he might still be alive. You know about the intimate relationship between my father and Arling Nora, right?" "Yes, I read about it." "Okay, listen. The rumors claim that my father's sightings were in the area of Mandaue, Noga, Cordova, and Compostela Valley in the Davao region." "Okay, so what's the significance?" "Arling Nora has a relative in each of these locations." "On all 4 sites, precisely." At this point, feeling somewhat perplexed, Shigeru took some time to reflect on the situation. He was very worried about Lorena, knowing how close she was to Leonora, and even considered her to be a second mother. "Go ahead, you have my permission," Lorena said. "What do you mean?" "I can clearly see the shadow of the question that is heavily etched in your head." "Spit it out," she said, while Shigeru gave her a weary smile. "What are you planning to do?" Shigeru asked. "I want to find my father." "And do what?" "I believe he's in trouble," Lorena replied. With the weight of the crisis on his head, he replied, "What I read in your notes is almost a confession from your father, and are you still not convinced that he is dangerous?" "My father is just like you. He has done a lot of bad things, and has collected a number of enemies along the way. But he's not entirely evil. I strongly believe that there is still goodness in him. I don't believe he is capable of ordering the kidnapping of Tammy and the execution of Amanda. There has to be someone else behind this, I know." "Was he a bad father?" "No, I wouldn't refer to him as a bad father. He was just absent all the time." The committee. Walking down the hallway of the State Department, Arthur Schultz receives a text message informing him of a security breach that they suspected to be the work of the notorious hacker known as the Yūrei. Unlike typical hackers who often strategically select targets that are easy to break into, the Yūrei targets those businesses that invest heavily in next-generation firewalls and intrusion detection systems, IDs, apart from having greater payoffs. But what really sets the Yūrei apart and makes it the biggest threat is its breakthrough in disabling the cryptic digital signature of the Bitcoin network. This digital signature is a type of one-way cryptographic puzzle that is resolvable only to the owner, a mathematical operation that is thought to be impossible to crack, with its pair of keys generated by an elliptic curve digital signature algorithm. The State Department, with its share of hacking attacks, ordered a large-scale crackdown on the Yūrei's hacking activities by deploying its white hat hackers to solve the problem. But the Yūrei remained elusive, and all their efforts failed. Stepping into a room overflowing with support staff, Arthur Schultz looks about and goes to the water dispenser to get a cup of water. As he filled his cup with water, he surveyed the area, looking at the monitors of every person in the room. A few minutes later, senior investigator Lila Skeenman enters the room, looks him in the eye, discreetly beckoning him with her finger, telling him to come over. Transferring to a conference room with a frosted privacy vinyl running across the center of the glass window, Lila Skeenman rolls down the blinds for complete privacy. "Did you manage to receive my message?" asked Lila Skeenman. Are you talking about the hacking incident at Dutch Bangla Bank Limited? That's not the work of the Yūrei. How did you come to that conclusion? You haven't read the report yet. It's just not him. Feeling indifferent to his words. So what are you planning on doing about it? I have no intention of doing anything, he responded. Let someone else deal with it. Sensing that she felt perplexed, frustrated, and tried to compose herself in his presence, he breathed a sigh of exhaustion, put on his glasses, signaled her to hand over the papers she was carrying, and sat on one of the conference chairs. Having reviewed the report briefly, his conclusion was almost instantaneous. Whoever prepared this report did a good job, but as I said, this attack has nothing to do with the Yūrei. This was done by a different hacker. Further reading the report out loud. As written, the hacker seems to have installed a malicious code to execute malicious host commands on the bank's network and allegedly used the access to orchestrate fund withdrawals from the bank's ATMs machines, stealing $3 million. Are you kidding me? He said, cutting himself off from reading before removing his glasses. Lila, I don't understand why you chose to bother me with this issue when you know that over the past 6 years, the person I'm after has stolen over $25 billion worth of Bitcoin. I'm sorry, I just thought you'd want an update on this incident. After all, this is your job. In Lila's mood, a sudden shift was quite evident. Do you have an update on Yūrei? Yes, I do, replied Arthur Schultz. I want your face in front of the committee and give them an update. When? They're having a discussion right now. Located on the 3rd floor of the building, the conference room had an elliptical 10-meter Bolivian rosewood table consisting of 16 executive chairs, with only 12 of which were occupied. While the discussion was going on, they immediately took their seats. Among the people in attendance were Daniel Weiss, FBI Director, Stephen Kinney, Assistant Director of the Cyber Division, and other members of the National Security Agency, NSA, and the Secret Service. The issue that was being tackled when they arrived was the recent attack on the Dutch Bangla Bank Limited in Bangladesh. 2 other banks have also faced cyber attacks, the NCC Bank and the Prime Bank, but managed to avoid financial losses, as claimed. As Arthur Schultz hoped, his presence in the discussion was merely a security analyst, and when his attention was drawn to the question of whether the incident was related to the Yūrei, he replied, "Negative, sir. I don't think Yūrei was responsible for this attack. This is definitely the work of another hacking group." You sound very confident in your reply. Can you shed some light on how you came to the conclusion? Daniel Weiss, Secretary of Defense, asked. Let me just put it this way, sir, if this were basketball, the Yūrei would certainly be the GOAT. I don't mean to belittle the attack that was carried out, but the main reason why the DBBL was hacked was because it didn't have the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS. This certification would have prevented the breach. Okay, Arthur, let me clarify what you have just said. Are you telling us that this job is too small for the Yūrei? Is that what you're saying? Yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. Given the amount that this hacker has just stolen, $3 million, compared to Yūrei's $25 billion worth of bitcoins, I'd say it's a very comprehensible assessment. At this point, Stephen Kinney on the other side of the table was discreetly telling Arthur Schultz to wisely choose the words he was saying in front of the general, which he also discreetly acknowledged. Okay, Mr. Arthur Schultz, you made your point, so what do you intend to do about this? Stephen Kinney responded, a task force has already been created to look into this matter. With our good diplomatic relations with the Bangladesh government, we are currently working closely together to resolve the issue. That's fine, but let me just remind you all that the main focus of this committee is not on the Dutch Bangla Bank Limited incident, but rather on the greater security threat that comes from the Yūrei attacks. Mr. Arthur Schultz, can you please give us an update? By nodding his head, he accepted the request and pressed the intercom to get the attention of the slide controller. Can you kindly pull out the latest Yūrei files, and can we also get the handouts, said Arthur Schultz while talking to the intercom. A few seconds later, the first slide was shown. It was an image of a man who was shot dead on the floor and whose blood was spilled all over the carpet. Pointing to the screen. This man is Maurice Faure, a French sculptor based in Tokyo. On September 17, 2016, he was found dead in his apartment in Shibuya City, Tokyo. Our sources confirmed that he was murdered with the assistance of a hovering drone armed with a machine gun. But this was before our assets at the Mizuho Bank, in the Otemachi district of Chiyoda, Tokyo intercepted 7 large deposits sent to the Katsuyori Foundation, which was under the umbrella of the Katsuyori Global Law Office. The total amount of these 7 deposits is $3.48 billion. Gentlemen, if you recall, the number is exactly the same as the amount stolen by the Yūrei in the same year. Arthur Schultz pointed back to the screen when asking for the next slide. On the left, we have the Mizuho bank statement with the amount mentioned, while on the right is a newspaper clipping of the biggest cryptocurrency exchange hacking incident with the same stolen amount. Gentlemen, this is too much of a coincidence, don't you think? Momentarily interrupting, Mr. Schultz, may we know the name of this asset that got hold of this bank statement? Asked Daniel Weiss. Please forgive me, sir, but I can't disclose this information to protect my assets. I hope you understand. Daniel Weiss, leaning back to his seat and giving it a deep thought. Okay, but let me just remind you of the sensitivity of this document. None of the evidence presented in this discussion should leak out and should be well protected. Mr. Schultz, I believe that this is your responsibility. Yes, sir, I'll take note of that, he replied. Please continue. One of the staff handed over the remote slide presentation to Arthur Schultz. The Katsuyori Foundation, under the umbrella of the Katsuyori Global Law Office, is headed by a certain Japanese businessman named Peter Katsuyori. Pressing the remote slide. This is Peter Katsuyori, a Japanese tycoon who has single-handedly established Tent Robotics. Considered to be one of Japan's top robotic companies, among the services they offer are brain-controlled, next-generation prosthetic arms and legs, industrial automation systems, high-end medical devices and equipment, and a good number of advanced software for animation, healthcare, and industrial applications. All of these services included advanced artificial intelligence. Now, going back to the amount deposited. 6 days after the transfer, Peter Katsuyori was assassinated at Jigokudani Park in Japan on June 5, 2016, while he was with his daughter, Rona Katsuyori. Pressing the remote slide for the second time, the screen previews Rona Katsuyori. Now, this is where things get interesting. With a dozen bodyguards, only his daughter miraculously survived the massacre, with the money at her full disposal. You're insinuating that Rona Katsuyori might have been involved in her father's death? Yes. Lila Skeenman asked, breaking her silence. You can't ignore the overwhelming evidence before you, he said, feeling strongly. Daniel Weiss, reviewing the handouts, took some time to discuss the materials with the other officers. Arthur. Stephen Kinney called as he was reviewing the evidence. Yes. This happened in 2016. It's now 2018. When did you plan on telling me about this? It was only recently that we were able to put all the pieces together, and I was still trying to identify Rona Katsuyori's whereabouts. Are you seriously telling us that you don't know Rona Katsuyori's location? Daniel Weiss asked. Sir, we had her under surveillance. Her last location was in Cebu, Philippines, where she and her sisters had settled. Because of the family business, they traveled back and forth to Japan. After the bombing incident at the concert that they organized for their foundation, they suddenly disappeared. A bombing incident? Okay, listen, these are your latest directives. Hunt down the Katsuyori, get someone to spy on them, someone who can get really close, Defense Secretary Daniel Weiss ordered. The villa. Friday, October 19, 2018, walking the streets of Fuenteos Mina, after a sneak peek at what's inside the Robinsons Mall, Tammy decided to have a little food trip at her favorite hangout, at Punko Punko Sa Fuente. The place wasn't that fancy, but a friendly destination for a lot of travelers and patrons who are after a good adventure. The place was crowded when they arrived and had to wait for the seats to be vacant before they could take their turn. They ordered Chicharon Bulaklak, deep-fried ruffled fat, balbacua, beef stew with oxtail, kwek, deep-fried boiled quail eggs with flour, and a bunch of puso, hanging rice, while waiting for their turn. After eating, they took Marcus around the city at Lorina's invitation, giving them a chance to get to know him better, and even went to the extent of requesting him to stay at their house in Vista Grande, Pardo, as their guest. As soon as they arrived at the villa, the sisters went immediately to their rooms to rest, while Marcus and Shigeru were left to unload their belongings. The villa covered an area of about 1,100 square meters with an impressive cultivated tropical garden and a medium-sized swimming pool. The mansion also consisted of impressive high-vaulted ceilings with wooden beams and elegant white granite tiles, which were well polished and maintained. Right after unloading the bags, Marcus sat down on the sofa, while Shigeru handed him an ice-cold beer and sat next to where he was sitting. "Tired?" Shigeru asked. Marcus smiled and leaned his head on the backrest of the sofa. "Why is there so much traffic here in the Philippines?" he asked, complaining humorously. "Okay, man. I'm going to go upstairs now and retire. Just feel at home, and if you decide to lie down and rest, there's a guest room on that corner," Shigeru said, pointing to the room next to the stairs. Marcus nodded in agreement. Now, all alone in the living room, Marcus stretches his legs across the sofa, lays his head down, and momentarily closes his eyes. Faced with the moral dilemma of his feelings towards Amanda, he began to question his directives to the Katsuyori sisters. Pulling out his cell phone, he sees several unanswered messages and missed calls that he kept ignoring. In his mind, he began to evaluate the circumstances of winning the family's trust, but Marcus was having second thoughts. While tomorrow holds an ominous shape, he pondered on the kindness and trust given to him by Amanda. It was something he had not expected, and it saddened him that in the future, it would eventually cause her so much pain. In the kitchen, Marcus was busy cooking, while the others were fast asleep throughout the day. His mind was running like a runaway train, which was out of control, as much as he wanted to rest. He chopped vegetables, caramelized pork, grilled oysters, sliced salmon, and even managed to bake a matcha cake for Tammy. "They are awake," he said to himself, telling the sounds of their footsteps upstairs, and the wowing in amazement as they smelled the aroma coming from the kitchen. It was Amanda who was the first to look into the kitchen, and she was astounded. "Where did all this food come from?" Amanda asked as she stared at the stains on his white apron. It wasn't part of his plot to make her fall in love, his only intention was to give everyone a little relief after a long tiring day. Amanda smiled as she reached out to him, kissed him tenderly, and went on to help him set the table. Eyeing on the matcha cake, Lorena picked up the knife and cut a piece of the cake and saw several layers of cream, chocolate, vanilla, strawberries, and was very impressed. Settled down at the table, everyone was delighted to see so many mouth-watering dishes, and as for Shigeru, he patted Marcus on the back and said, "Good job." While at the table, an awkward moment of silence followed. With each person gauging which individual would dare to go first, Marcus did the honor of grabbing his dish, hinting at the awkwardness, took a handful of salad, and everyone followed. Right after enjoying the delectable feast, Lorena played some reggae music to the tune of Bob Marley's Buffalo Soldier, while holding a bottle of blackened whiskey and offering 2 glasses to Shigeru and Marcus. Amanda, sitting next to Marcus, took the empty glass and let Lorena fill it up and laid it down on the center table. Seeing how exhausted Marcus was, Amanda sat on the corner of the sofa, took a cushion, and let Marcus stretch his legs and lie down in her lap. Seeing that he instantly fell asleep, the moment he lied down, Lorena lowered the volume of the music and decided to transfer to the poolside with Shigeru. Continuing their discussion at the poolside. "So what do you think of Marcus?" Shigeru asked. "I like him. Amanda seems to be very fond of him, and seeing my sister happy, I'm also happy for her," she replied. "Why do you ask?" she added. "The same reason you like him." "You're worried about Amanda's feelings towards him?" she asked, thoughtfully considering his concern. "It's not for me to interfere, but I'm just a little worried about that. I can see that Amanda's feelings about him have deepened in a relatively short time." "I understand and I appreciate your concern," Lorena replied.